what you'll see in the workshop ahead is a bunch of skills around how to use FFmpeg, or how to use Momento, and how to use various embedding libraries for face recognition. Once I put these skills in, then your agents have to do a lot less work to research. Remember, the LLMs that are operating your coding harness, or that coding harness is operating, they are stateless. They have no idea what a face recognition thingy is. They have no idea what FFmpeg is. When you tell it to do something with FFmpeg, it's going to go back to the harness and tell the harness to go research, a bunch of manuals on FFmpeg, like the manual page and so forth, send it back, and then it's going to figure out how to, do the job that it needs to do, and it's going to do all this back and forth. But if you just start by going to a really expensive model, or a good model, and say, hey, generate me a skill that will have all of the details for FFmpeg that I expect for this particular project. Like just doing that first pass, and then including that skill when you're talking to, let's say, a lower class model, it streamlines your workflow, and it eliminates the back and forth, and it lets the agent focus better, or the LLMs focus a little bit better. And that voice.md file that you must have generated, or the devil's advocate agent, like those are skills. But you can also find skills online that others have made. There's a bunch of skills on how to not sound like an LLM. There's a bunch of skills on how to make good front-end agents. So make sure that you're kind of distilling some of your conventions into skills. I got to meet Boris, who's the author of Claude Code, recently, and the most profound thing that he said, and it changed the way I use my coding harnesses, is if you're the only one prompting your agents, you're doing it wrong. Like, you don't want to be a caveman prompting your agents. You need agents prompting your agents. Now, it sounds very, very meta, but let me illustrate an example of this. A friend of mine is building a video game using Claude Code. And, he's like, well, I build it, and then I play with it, and then I give it feedback, and so forth. And what we decided to experiment together was, tonight, and he used Codex for this part. He asked Codex, like, go play this game 100 times, collect feedback, incorporate that feedback into the game, into the gameplay, run it again, come up with the feedback, and just keep going until I'm coming back. And that goal ended up creating a lot richer narrative in his video game. It's a simple video game, but it didn't block on him, right? Like, a lot of times when we're using Claude Code with our 12 windows or whatever, the agent is just sitting there waiting for your next instruction. But if you give it a concrete set of goals, and you say, in Claude Code, the magic word is workflow. So if you can give it a workflow and say, continue going down this PRD until everything is completed, write unit tests along the way. As you are writing code, every time you finish writing code and you're done compiling, run a code review with Claude Code and with Codex. Find the highest priority items, fix them, run the Claude Code and Codex code reviews again until there's no issues, then run the integration test, and then just repeat this until this PRD's goals are met. It'll keep working for you even when you're not there prompting, and it just takes a little bit of that upfront investment in making that happen. So, and the implementation for workflow is quite simple. So Claude Code recently reinvented cron jobs, and it's called /loop. There's a /loop command, and it sounds really fancy. You should read some of the marketing material on it. It's definitely LLM generated, but it's a cron job, and it just, like, you can tell it to wake up every 3 minutes and do something. So when a workflow happens, all it's doing is it sets a loop that wakes up every 3 minutes. It wakes a coordinator agent up, and the coordinator agent looks at your goals, and it looks at the state of all of the other agents, and then it decides to steer them in a particular direction. That's it. Like, it's not real intelligence. It's like it's basically a program, right? And And it does this, and I find it really effective to go iron out hypotheses or build me a prototype that I can then go rewrite from scratch if I need to, or to prove out what is actually possible versus not, especially in the performance world. Now, the next trick may ruin your life, so just be careful. So some context on this. I am addicted to coding harnesses like Claude Code, Codex, and so forth. And there will be times where I'm trying to go to my kid's soccer game and we got to leave, but I'm like, no, I got to just make sure that this part completes so I can give it the next prompt, and then I'll turn off my laptop and go. And that was really frustrating because then I started being late to soccer games. And then Claude Code launched remote control. So inside of Claude Code, you can just do /remote control, and then you whip out your phone and you open Claude Code, and the experience is wonderful. It'll just bring that terminal over to your phone, and you can prompt it from your phone. So now, instead of watching soccer, I can be chatting with my agents and keeping tabs if they need to be prompted. So the defense mechanism I have against that is to write better prompts so that I don't have to be interrupted so much. But it is extremely powerful to continue being able to drive the context and drive the agents forward in case they do get blocked. Claude Code has it. Codex has it. It's fun to have that. And once you have remote control, my personal workflow, I usually have a single EC2 instance that runs in a sandbox, and I go and I turn on Tmux session, and then I run Claude Code on that session in a brand new folder, and then I enable remote control. So now I can be like, and that EC2 instance is always online. It's got great internet connectivity, and I can just prompt it from for each project. I can just continue prompting it from my phone and continue to make it work. It's very addictive and very dangerous, so be careful. All right. With that, we will move on to another hands-on exercise. And hopefully the exercise you did before will help you be better at conducting this particular exercise. So you're about to build something that otherwise would have taken, the agent instructed me to say that it would have taken you a quarter. It's not true. It's like this project took me like a week in my class to build when I was in school. It's a very simple face recognition library. And all it's going to do is you're going to give it a face, and it'll tell you if it recognizes that face or not. You're going to train it with a few faces, like George Bush and so forth, like people that are famous. You can register your own face so it can recognize you, and you can have it basically stream from FFmpeg from your camera on your Mac, and if it detects you, it'll tell you that, hey, I detected you. And you can take pictures. If your people next to you are would allow you to take a picture, you can register their face, and then you can kind of turn your camera and see what happens. Now, so that's the QR code for it. I'll bring it back later. Some warnings. You may not finish, and that is okay. That is by design. It may not work, and that's also okay. And you may leave inspired and a little curious about how to make it work. If you want a cheat code, if you were at this was a video game, you can literally just go to Codex and say, hey, here's a tutorial link. Go build it, because it has all the context. And I swear, like 10 minutes later, it will do all of it for you. And that's a really good prototype. If you wanted to do it, you could. The other extreme is that you can copy each line of code and each piece of instruction there manually. I encourage you to do something in the middle. Okay, don't like manually try each thing, but also don't have the LLM just do the tutorial for it. It's a pretty good experience. Like if you just have it do it too, like you can at least get the instant gratification, but then you may not learn as much. face recognition, like if your Ring doorbell is doing it or your Wise Cam is doing it, it's actually not a very hard problem conceptually. All you're really doing is you're generating a vector embedding of your face. So basically, you take a face and you convert that into 512 numbers. Okay, and there's a model that will run locally on your laptop, and you take a picture, you find the largest face in it. That's a super easy problem that that we shouldn't worry too much about, but unless you want to really get into computer vision. But once it detects the face, it will give that face to the embedding model, and the embedding model will convert that face into 512 numbers. And when it sees another face, it will look for the numbers that are closest to those 512 numbers. And vector searches, they sound really, really complicated, but I can just give you a quick illustration that that will hopefully make it much, much simpler. Let's say that I'm on a two-dimensional plane. So on this stage, I'm at an X and a Y location. And if, Nate, can you stand over there? Like at the edge of that. There's a very, like, you can measure the distance between me and Nate, and we're, not too far apart. And that's in 2 dimensions. Now I'm going to go stand right next to him, and you would argue that we're very, very close to each other, right? So in a 2-dimensional space, we're very, very close to each other. But let's say there was 100 stories in this building, and I was on the 100th story of the building, and Nate's here. Even though we're very close on 2 dimensions, we're very far apart in 3 dimensions. And let's say, you can have a seat, sorry. Let's say he comes here tomorrow, and he's on the 100th floor, or I'm on the 100th floor today, and he comes here, right here tomorrow, and he's sitting the exact same XY coordinates that I'm on, but in a different dimension, like on a 3D dimension, we're very far apart. On a time dimension, we could be centuries apart. So the vectors are representing this hyperdimensional thing. Like there's 512 dimensions in this particular example. Oftentimes you see like 1500 and so forth. But you're basically calculating the distance between your candidate face, says 512 numbers, and all of the other faces that you have in a cluster, and you find the closest match. And if they're close enough, then you say I found a match. If there's like nothing very close to the 512 numbers that you found, then you say I don't have a match. It's just that simple. Now, there's a lot of math that goes into, well, how do you turn the face into the 512 numbers? And that's much, much more complex. But once you have the numbers, then it's just math at the end of the day. We store those numbers inside a vector index. You can even brute force this. There's not going to be that many faces. And then you run FFmpeg and you try it, and you see if it works or not. For now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give everybody how much, like we have until 12:15? Okay. I won't keep you hostage for that long. Yes. Let's take a 10-minute bio break, and people can come back, and you can start working on these as you see fit, and then we'll have some concluding remarks. And then as you need help, just raise your hand. We'll come by. There's a few of us that have run through this tutorial a few times. We can help out. I also encourage you to engage with the LLMs on asking questions. Each of you will have unique questions about, well, maybe you want to learn more about how vectors work. Maybe you want to learn more about the way the index works. Or maybe you want to learn more about how the vectors were generated. Or you want to learn more about FFmpeg. Like, ask the LLM those questions. Ask your coding harness. Whatever coding harness you're using, you can use our coding harness or you can use Claude Code. But ask it questions to kind of inspire curiosity, because that is also a very nice kind of addiction. If you start looking at the FFmpeg command lines, like what are the other parameters that I can use? Why am I doing 1 frame per second or 2 frames per second? Why not 5? You can ask it those questions to kind of understand this really, really simple example a lot deeper as well. So with that, like people can go off, take a break, come back, and we'll just be in a interactive setting for about half an hour. You finish what you can, but ask questions. We'll come by and help you. And yeah, feel free to reach out. You can also come talk to me over here too.